Good evening. This is really wonderful, because it means that many of you are here out of sincerity, out of devotion. And yet, if we are honest, there has been a strange dryness in the soul, a sense that prayer, meditation, practice have become labor. Now then, we must never use the words right and wrong in speaking of these matters. There are states and stages of consciousness, and everything we have done up to this very moment has been appropriate at the level where we found ourselves. In other words, there is no blame in this room. There is only the opportunity to recognize what the heart has been whispering. I am tired. You see, the tiredness is not from God, and it is not from love. It is from the way we have been approaching God. Let us name it plainly, so there is no fog about it. Spiritual burnout. Trying to be good enough, quiet enough, disciplined enough, enlightened enough, so that at the end of all the trying, presence will look our way and reward us with a visitation. We rise early, we sit long, we tighten our will, and after a season, the sweetness thins, and the very things that once nourished us begin to feel like duties we dare not drop. Watch out. I'm speaking now from the standpoint of the infinite way. Never be ashamed to acknowledge it when your soul is weary. It may be a holy signal that you are outgrowing an earning-based spirituality and being invited into a higher realization. Now then, what is it we are doing when we strain? Are we contacting God, or are we trying to reach God? That one word makes all the difference. To try to reach suggests distance. To make contact assumes omnipresence. The paradox, gentle but absolute, is this. Presence is not the prize at the end of effort. Presence is the truth behind effort, the life within it, already here, awaiting recognition. If God is spirit and the earth is already full of the Lord, then what could our labor add to omnipresence? What would we tell God that God does not already know? What could we offer that would purchase grace? Do not hear this as a rebuke of your prayers or your meditations. Never, never, never. It is only to say that the state of consciousness with which we have been praying may have been the state that keeps us outside the door, knocking loudly, when the key is within. You see, when "I'm trying" stands at the center, God is made into a goal, and we grow fatigued managing the distance to our own source. But when recognition dawns, when we concede that presence is, that presence was before our trying and will be after it, prayer ceases to be labor and becomes communion. In the hours ahead, we will not discard devotion. We will purify it. We will let go of deserving and return to awareness, to wordless receptivity, to gratitude and love without an object. For now, rest in this assurance. Nothing needs to be earned to reveal what already fills this room. Only recognized, only contacted. And in that, dryness gives way to living water. Now then, let us set our feet on firm ground so that there is no confusion as we go forward. We must never use the words right and wrong in evaluating our spiritual practice. There are states and stages of consciousness. What supports one stage will, at a later stage, become a strain. Never because it is evil, but because consciousness is outgrowing that garment. You see, a child's shoes are perfect for a child, but there comes a day when the very perfection of that shoe becomes pain, and the pain is not punishment. It is guidance. In our early work, effort, structure, schedules, repetitions, these are merciful. They gather the wandering mind. They wean us from distractions. They teach us to sit, to listen, to honor. But later, without our noticing, the same effort begins to keep attention on me doing rather than God being, and the shoe pinches. I'm speaking now from the standpoint of the infinite way, which is simply to say, from the standpoint of consciousness. The hidden shift is not from bad to good practice. It is from a personal sense centering itself to an impersonal presence revealing itself. In other words, early effort is a teacher. Prolonged effort becomes a veil. The very intensity with which we try to secure God tightens the personal sense of I, and a tightened I cannot recognize omnipresence because its gaze is fastened upon its own trying. Tightness looks at itself. Receptivity looks at God. Dryness, then, is not failure. Never, never, never. Dryness is information. The bareness, the thinning sweetness, the flatness after much practice, these are often the quiet announcement that your consciousness is ready to move from technique as achievement to recognition as communion. Do not scold yourself. Do not change the shoes out of fear. Change them because growth has outgrown them. If you listen closely in such seasons, you will find that what has become empty is not God. It is the machinery of me managing my way to God. Now watch out. When you make a career out of seeking God, you may, without intending it, be seeking the feeling of God instead of God. Feelings come and go. Presence is. If you measure your prayer by warmth, by tears, by ecstasy, you are still consulting the personal sense for a verdict. That is a subtle idolatry of I'm trying and I am feeling. The law is gentler and higher. Be still and know. Knowing does not depend upon the weather in your emotions. So the mechanics of our transition are simple and exact. Intense effort tightens. Tightness increases self-reference. Self-reference cannot perceive what is everywhere because it is preoccupied with itself. Relaxation into wordless honor loosens that knot. Loosening permits awareness to turn from the worker to the work, from the seeker to the isness that has never moved. At that point, prayer begins to shift on its own, from labor to communion, from getting to beholding. And the moment beholding dawns, even faintly, you will discover that the absence you were fighting was not God's absence, but your attention's contraction. Let the contraction release, and the omnipresence that has always been will begin to be available as living contact. Now then, if we are to be honest with ourselves, and we must be, or nothing real will come of this, we have to place a gentle finger on the exact nerve that has been throbbing in our practice. There is, hidden underneath much devotion and many hours, a small bargain that the personal sense keeps whispering. If I pray enough, if I heal enough, if I serve enough, if I fast enough, then surely God will come near. Watch out. I'm speaking now from the standpoint of the infinite way. We must never use the words right and wrong about this. There are states and stages of consciousness. In a certain stage, that bargain is as natural as a child tugging at a parent's sleeve. It is not wicked. It is simply the stage where the mind still thinks in terms of earning. But you see, to the degree that the bargain remains hidden, to that degree it turns God into a goal and prayer into labor. Consider the subtlety of it. The personal sense does not merely want God. It wants a spiritual experience that it can hold up to itself as proof. Warmth, a glow, a voice, a relief, a sign. It is still the I consulting the I for a verdict on God. The very one who is trying to get presence is the one who cannot receive it, because he is full of himself trying. In other words, the center is still the seeker, and whenever the seeker is the center, what is seen is the circumference of the seeker, not the infinitude of God. Do you see how innocent this is, and yet how exact its result? We end up measuring prayer by sensations and outcomes, and so the prayer itself never has a chance to become what it is: communion. Now let us clear the air of guilt, because guilt is of no use in spiritual work. Never, never, never. There is no shame in discovering that your prayer has had yourself at its center. There is only the relief of finally seeing the mechanism. I have no spiritual pride about these things. I know where I am, and I know just where I am not yet. So do not be ashamed to say, "I have been trying to earn." That is honesty, and honesty is humility, and humility is the open door through which grace may enter. The moment you acknowledge the stage you are in, you stop pretending, and when pretension stops, striving loosens of itself. And now the transition can be made. Once we see that "I'm trying" has made God into a project, we can lay the project down. We can stop fighting ourselves, stop bargaining, stop outlining, and turn in a new direction, not to get, not to prove, but to be still and to know. When "I'm trying" becomes the center, contact is replaced by striving. So let the center shift. Begin the only prayer that ever makes contact. Honor God. Acknowledge omnipresence. Release all desire, and rest in quiet receptivity. Not for a feeling, not for an answer, not for a sign, only for God as God. In that wordless consent, the goal dissolves, and the living presence, which has never moved, becomes available as actual communion. From there, life will unfold lawfully. But first, the center must change. Now then, having laid the project down, let us take a clear look at the habit that, more than any other, keeps prayer laborious and the soul tired. Petition and outlining. Watch out. I'm speaking now from the standpoint of the infinite way. We must never use the words right and wrong here. There are states and stages of consciousness. Petition is a stage. Outlining is a stage. But you see, the very structure of it makes fatigue inevitable, because it keeps attention riveted on what is not yet, on lack to be corrected, on conditions to be managed. And anything that keeps attention on lack will wear you out. What is petition as it is commonly practiced? It is going to God with a list, with a plan, with a schedule. Do this, fix that, give me this outcome in this way by Thursday. And outlining? It is the same thing in a fancier coat. Here is the person, the amount, the timing, the diagnosis to be changed, the door to be opened. In other words, we are instructing the infinite, and then, this is where the exhaustion begins, we must monitor whether our instructions are being carried out. We check the mailbox, we check the doctor's report, we check our feelings, we check the bank, and every check adds a little more strain because the center is still the manager. That is a treadmill, not communion. Now I'll go further. The moment you ask God for things as things, you have turned God into a Santa Claus, a celestial supplier of objects, and you have stepped down from spirit to a mental picture of a giver and a gift. God is spirit. God is a law as well as love. What is the use of asking law to make an exception for you? What would you tell omniscience that it does not already know? The very act of petition for things assumes absence and persuadability, and so it binds you to the sense of absence. It cannot satisfy the hunger for God contact because it is not aimed at God. It is aimed at things. Do not misunderstand me. Never be ashamed if you find petition on your lips. It belongs to a stage. Never, never, never. But be wise enough to hear the Master's correction. Take no thought for your life, what ye shall eat, or what ye shall drink. And in the same breath, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added unto you. Do you see the order? No thought, no managing, no bargaining. Seek the kingdom, which is contact, and then there is an adding, which is the lawful outworking. The Christ way is not to outline the adding. It is to abide in the seeking that is not seeking for, but seeking of God as God. Never, never, never go to God to get God to do something. Go to God for God. Go to God for light, for the realization of presence, for communion. The added things will appear as they must, when they must, because law is law. But if you attempt to pry them out by petition, or to script them by outlining, you will be condemned to perpetual measurement of yourself, of God, of time, and the soul cannot live under a ruler. So let us wrest the mind from project management. Let us refuse to dishonor spirit by treating it as a storehouse to be raided in emergencies. Turn within without a single desire, and if a desire rises, let it be this: Father, reveal thyself. That is not labor. That is worship. And when worship is restored to prayer, a strange thing happens. Weight lifts, breath returns, and life, without your management, begins quietly to arrange itself. Now then, let us take the next sure step, because unless this is clear, you will swing between hope and disappointment and call that spirituality. God is omnipresent. Presence is not sometimes here and sometimes gone. It is the very life of this room, the withinness of your breath, the ground under your weariness. But you see, omnipresence is not the same as availability in your experience. We must never use the words right and wrong about that. There are states and stages of consciousness. At one stage, the sea is all around you, but the well is capped. The water is present, but it is not flowing into your cup. That is what we mean by availability. Availability is contact. It is that quiet, unmistakable click, a yielding of the personal sense, and in its place, a soft knowing that does not argue, a stillness that is not fabricated. Nothing dramatic need occur. Sometimes it is only the sense that the weight has slipped off the shoulders and there is a presence living your very looking. In that instant, you have not brought God. Never, never, never. You have only stopped standing in your own doorway. The light was shining. The shade was drawn. The click is the raising of the shade. Watch out. I'm speaking now from the standpoint of the infinite way. Effort is not evil. It belongs to a stage. But when effort imagines itself a person crossing a distance to reach God, effort becomes misdirected. In other words, you spend yourself building bridges over a chasm that exists only to the personal sense. You see, the work is not to bring God. The work is to stop blocking the awareness of God. The blocking is subtle. Outlining, managing, measuring, consulting feelings for a verdict. All of this is shade. Pull it up, and the same room is different, not because the sun has changed, but because it is now available to you. How, then, is this pulling up accomplished? Not by more words, not by bargaining, not by tightening the will. Recognition, not attainment. Turn within without a single demand and let attention relax out of the forehead, out of the calendar, out of the checklist, into the simple fact of is. Be still, no performance. Honor God as already here. Consent to be loved without supplying the terms. In that wordless receptivity, the click comes in its own timing. You do not make it. You allow it. And here is the assurance. Once you understand availability, the practice becomes surprisingly restful. You are no longer a seeker pacing the shore. You are one who sits, uncaps the well, and drinks. Contact made, law functions as law. Guidance and supply do not have to be induced. They are added as the natural consequence of presence recognized. For now, let this be enough. Omnipresence is the fact. Availability is the experience. And the door between them is not labor, but recognition. Now then, if availability is the key, let us be exact about the door we are using, because words can deceive us and habits are stubborn. Prayer, at its highest, is not speaking to God about your life. It is resting in God until the very sense of a you with a life loosens, and there is only communion. Watch out. I'm speaking now from the standpoint of the infinite way. We are not judging the stages that have speech and petition in them. We are saying that there is a further stage in which speech gives way to a listening, and listening matures into a wordless knowing. In other words, prayer as communion is the practice of letting separation dissolve, not the practice of informing spirit about conditions. What then is wordless prayer? Do not imagine blankness. Never, never, never. This is not a vacancy, it is a fullness without commentary. It is a quiet receptivity, a felt stillness that hums beneath the mind's noise. It has texture, like the air after a storm when everything has been washed and the leaves are glistening, or the moment just before dawn when the world holds its breath. You are not forcing attention, you are consenting to be attentive. It is a listening that does not lean forward, an awareness that lets the thoughts pass as if you were sitting by a river watching leaves go by. And somewhere beneath that watching, there is a warmth, or a soft widening, or simply the sense, I am being lived. No wrestling, no managing, a letting. Now you achievers, be at peace. Receptivity is not passivity. It is the most alert posture in the universe because it refuses the personal agenda and stands ready for what is. It is the sentinel at the gate who does not shout orders, who does not pace, but whose eyes are open to the horizon. It is the sailor who trims the sail to the wind instead of rowing himself to exhaustion. You see, to be receptive is to be spiritually active without strain. It is to honor that spirit is the actor and you are the instrument. If a phrase helps you enter, let it be gentle and spare. Father, reveal thyself. Not to get a thing, not to bend law, only to know the presence that already is. Whisper it once, perhaps twice, as you settle, and then let it drop into the silence like a stone into a clear pool. Do not fish it back out to see if it worked. Leave it and be still and know. The knowing is not a sentence, it is a state. And here is the paradox you can prove for yourself. When prayer is no longer labor, it becomes fruitful. When it ceases to be a project and becomes communion, it becomes contact. Contact made, law functions as law. Ideas arrive unforced. Right action is shown without outlining. The next step appears on time as if it had always been there, waiting for you to look. You did not earn this. You removed the interference. So let us make our prayer a resting, a listening, a loving without an object, and you will discover that the very quiet you feared would be empty is the fullness that carries your day. Be still, honor God, and allow the click. The rest will be added. Now then, since prayer as communion is wordless receptivity, let us put our hand on the hinge that swings the door. Gratitude and love, without an object. Watch out. I'm speaking now from the standpoint of the infinite way. We must never use the words right and wrong about gratitude. There are states and stages of consciousness. At an early stage, gratitude sounds like, "Thank you for fixing this. Thank you for getting me that job. Thank you for healing Aunt Mary." That is not sin. It is simply gratitude tied to an outcome. But you see, the very tying keeps you on a timeline. Before and after. Did it happen? Did it not happen? And the measuring self stands there with a clipboard, checking God. That kind of gratitude, because it is transactional, will sooner or later exhaust you. It keeps alive the bargain and strengthens the one who is always asking, always waiting, always evaluating. Spiritual gratitude is another thing altogether. It has no object, no receipt to wave, no ledger to balance. It is gratitude for God as God. Gratitude that there is such a presence, such a law, such an isness. It is a quiet inner thank you, not for this or that, but for being itself, for the truth that never alters, for the love whose nature is to give of its own self. In the same way, love here is not an emotion you muster or a mood you watch for. Love is a stance. I love thy presence. I love thy law. I love truth. Not to get, not to earn, only because loving reality is the nature of the soul when it is not bargaining. And I'll go further. There is no other way to open the soul to the flow of God except through gratitude and love. Never, never, never. That isn't a threat. It is the description of how consciousness flowers. The rose does not open by thinking about the sun. It warms and yields. Why does this heal burnout? Because objectless gratitude removes the future from prayer. The mind that measures has nothing to count. The tense project of self-improvement has no checklist to tighten around. In that loosening, the I that labored is not fed, and without its constant management, availability increases. You feel it as a softening behind the eyes, a deep untying of a knot you forgot you were holding. The click, not made, allowed. Gratitude and love have rendered the atmosphere conductive, and presence, which was everywhere, now lives here as experience. And then, listen carefully. The outer effects appear as they must, in their own lawful order. Not as miracles pleaded out of a distant deity, but as the natural fruit of contact. I have watched this over and over and over again. After a season of bareness in which one stops outlining and simply abides in gratitude without an object, the needed idea lights on the mind like a bird that trusts your open palm. A phone rings from no contact you had pushed, and the line you needed opens. The child quiets and sleeps, though no incantation was spoken. The bill is met because the way of meeting presents itself, frequently in a form you hadn't dreamed of, sometimes so simply that you wonder why it ever seemed difficult. The refrigerator is always full, not because you wrestled money out of heaven, but because life arranges itself around the law you have honored. So begin quietly. In your sitting, let one or two phrases rise and fall. Father, I love thy presence. I am grateful for thy being. Then let even the phrases go, and let the gratitude remain without name. If feeling comes, bless it. If it does not, bless anyway. Remember, love is not the heat in the heart. It is the posture of consent. Keep to this for moments throughout the day. No bargaining, no outlining, no tallying. And watch what happens to the weight you have been carrying. It will not be pried off. It will evaporate, because you will have stepped out from under it. Gratitude and love without an object dissolve the bargaining mind and open consciousness to presence. And from presence, life unfolds. Quietly, lawfully, sufficiently. Now then, let me testify to a pattern I have seen so consistently that I would be untrue to you if I did not name it plainly. After a season of bareness, when the techniques feel like dry leaves and the mind has no more prayers to push, if one will stop managing God and simply abide in objectless gratitude, guidance and supply appear without strain. I am not speaking of fireworks. I am speaking of a steady, lawful appearing as natural as steam rising from heated water. There are states and stages of consciousness, and in this stage, what you have been calling nothing happening is often the exact interval in which the personal sense is loosening its grip so that spiritual impulse can register. You see, the soil looks idle in winter. It is not idle. Roots are at work where eyes cannot go. I have watched this in my own work over and over again. After a series of meetings, there would be a lull. No invitations, no plans, a sense of inner emptiness where once there had been many words. The temptation to outline is fiercest right there. Write to this one, arrange that, secure the next city. Watch out. I'm speaking now from the standpoint of the infinite way. In those hours, I have learned to sit, to honor God, to love the presence without asking a single thing. Often nothing surfaces then and there, but the next morning or on a walk, an idea rises like a quiet buoy, one call to make, or a subject to open next month, or sometimes a simple rest. And as I follow that one lighted step, the rest arranges itself. The letter arrives, the door opens, the need is met. Not as reward, never, never, never. As the lawful fruit of contact. A businessman wrote that he could not meet Friday's payroll. He had a list of persuasive speeches for his banker and a stomach in knots. He set them all down, sat in silence, repeated once, "Father, reveal thyself," and then loved that presence for 10 minutes without one financial thought. He rose with a single, very practical nudge. Call a supplier and renegotiate delivery by 3 days. The supplier, unasked before, agreed gladly. Payroll was met. No miracle. Law functioning as law when the manager stepped aside. A mother, pacing with a restless child, found no relief in hour-long affirmations. In the bareness, she surrendered the fixes, held the child, and turned within with a wordless love for God as God. Nothing happened for a time. Then peace like a soft blanket came upon the room, and the child slept. The next day, the insight appeared to change a small routine. Harmony held. Added unto, you see. But I tried silence, and nothing happened. Yes, and so have I, when my silence was a technique to make something happen. That is outlining in softer clothes. Silence used to pry open outcomes will wear you out. Silence lived as worship will open you. Be still and know does not say, be still and make. It says, know. Knowing is contact, and contact bears its own fruit in its own hour. Now then, let this reassure you. The gap is not abandonment. It is the unclenching that makes recognition possible. Hold to gratitude and love without an object. Refuse to check the clock. In a few minutes, we will not leave this as inspiration. We will anchor it in a simple, repeatable practice of recognition. Honor, release, receptivity, gratitude, by which this pattern may become the rhythm of your days. Now then, let us anchor this in a practice you can take into your room tonight and into your morning tomorrow. A brief 12 to 15 minutes, not as a technique to make something happen, but as recognition. Watch out. I'm speaking now from the standpoint of the infinite way. We must never use the words right and wrong about how you do this. There are states and stages of consciousness. But there is an order here that protects you from turning prayer into labor. First, honor God. Sit quietly, comfortably, and let the body be at ease. Close the eyes if you wish, or let them rest softly. Acknowledge, not as poetry, but as orientation, that Spirit is the only presence and the only power, here, now, within and around, the life of your very awareness. Whisper once if it helps, Father, reveal thyself, and then let even that whisper sink. You are not inviting a distant God, you are consenting to the is that is already here. Honor is not words, it is turning the face of the heart toward what is real. Second, release desire as leverage. This is not repression, it is surrender of bargaining. Say within, gently, I need nothing to prove that God is here. I do not come to get, I come to know. Let that sentence dissolve, and with it, let go of the timetables, the measurements, the urgencies. In other words, lay down the clipboard. Never, never, never attempt to trade devotion for outcomes. That is a store counter, not a sanctuary. Third, enter wordless receptivity. Sit and listen. Let thoughts pass as if you were by a stream watching leaves float by. Do not push. Do not chase. Do not fix. The work is not to get still. The work is to notice the stillness that is already beneath the thoughts. If a sound occurs, let it be inside the same stillness. If a feeling arises, let it come and go. You are not rowing, you are trimming your sail to the wind of spirit. Be still and know. Fourth, let gratitude without an object become the atmosphere. Not thank you for this or that, simply a soft thank you for being itself, for presence as presence, for law as law. Love the truth that God is God. If warmth is felt, bless it. If nothing is felt, bless anyway. Gratitude here is not a statement. It is a climate into which your soul opens like a flower to sun. Fifth, close without checking results. End as you began, quietly. Do not peek at your life to see if anything moved. Rise and carry this recognition into the next ordinary act. Wash a dish, answer a letter, make the one simple call that is quietly indicated. No outlining, no tallying. If an idea presents, follow it without fuss. If none does, rest in the certainty that law is functioning, though you are not monitoring it. Keep to this for 12 to 15 minutes, once or twice a day, not as achievement, but as worship. In that rhythm, contact is restored without strain, and life, in its own lawful order, is added unto you. Now then, we do not live our days in a chair with eyes closed. We live them at desks, in kitchens, on phones, in quiet rooms with someone we love, and sometimes in places of noise and pressure. The question is not whether you will act. You will plan, you will sign, you will care, you will answer. The question is from where the action proceeds. When action flows to earn contact, it is heavy. You become the engine, and the load is your own. When action flows from contact, it is light. The same email is written, the same floor is swept, the same decision is made. But the energy is different because source has been acknowledged. You see, nothing special is added to the task. Something burdensome is removed from the doer. Here is your cue for the day, and use it as often as breath. When pressure rises, do not intensify effort. Pause and return to recognition. Stand where you are, and, if only for a single quiet second, let the inner word form. The place whereon I stand is holy ground. Not to get it holy, never, 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 but to remember what is already so. Let the shoulders drop. Let the brow soften. Let the manager in you set down the clipboard. Honor God as presence. Release the bargaining. Open in wordless receptivity, and allow a whisper of objectless gratitude. Then, proceed with the next simple step that is at hand. Often, it will be astonishingly ordinary. One call, one sentence, one no, one not yet. The difference is that you are trimming the sail rather than rowing. And if you forget, if the old habit of earning rushes back with its clocks and measurements, do not strike yourself. We must never use the words right and wrong about stages. Smile gently at the one who is trying so hard. Notice the stage and return. Over and over and over again. 10 times in an hour, 50 times in a day, if need be. This is not failure. This is training the attention to live at its own center. No drama, no verdicts, only the practice of recognition resumed. Now let me promise you without superstition. Needs are met in the measure that consciousness is aligned with presence, and harmony appears in its time, as lawful unfolding, not as a prize for performance. Sometimes the form will not match your former outlines. Sometimes the timing will humble your schedule. But law is law. Contact made, ideas arrive. Strength is renewed. Doors open or close with a rightness you can feel. And even when nothing outward shifts immediately, the weight under which you were bending is gone. That, too, is supply. So go on and do the same life. Meetings, meals, budgets, children, patience, without the same weight. Keep the cue close. The place whereon I stand is holy ground. Let it interrupt hurry. Let it season your sentences. Let it be the pause in which spirit gets a hearing. And hear this with tenderness and with insistence. Never make God the reward for your devotion. Let devotion be the gratitude for God's nearness. Go to God for God. Walk from God with God. And let the rest be added in its season.